Alright, this is gonna sound crazy, but you'll totally understand by the end of the video. Criminals were super important for communities in the countryside. If there's one word I could use to describe rural Japan back in the Kamakura period, it would be safe. It's safe to assume that you could have been killed at any time from violence. But it was also those who committed violence, the bandits and outlaws, that rural society depended on for survival. Why? Well, two big changes were happening in the second half of the Kamakura period that pushed people into the arms of violent men. One, in 1274, the Mongols looked at Japan and said, "Nice islands, be a shame if someone invaded them," then discovered that horses don't work on water. And in 1281, they rediscovered that fact. The elites praised the warriors that defended the nation, but when it came time to reward these men for their brave deeds, the government flipped open a map and realized they didn't have enough land to give out. Many of the defenders felt they got far less than they deserved. That was bad enough, but the shogunate was terrified of a third invasion. And to make sure the country wouldn't be caught with its pants down the next time, they decided they needed to keep strict order in the country. The authorities cracked down hard on law-breaking, often ignoring local rules and customs. So the veterans were mad they didn't get rewarded, and rural commoners were mad that this faraway government was getting all up in their business. The second thing that happened was the spread of new tools and agricultural techniques that made farming really productive. You could grow a lot more with less land. And as you know from your own eating habits, more food means more growth. The population expanded day after day. Sounds great, right? You could have more workers, more friends. Only problem was, those friends needed farmland of their own. And pretty soon, things got crowded, and people sat around the drinking mat complaining that back in their days, there was free land as far as the eye could see. But nowadays, their view was blocked by huge family trees. As land became more valuable, people became more attached to the places they lived. So in times of conflict, it was harder for them to do what I do, which is to close my eyes and run away. No, they were more likely to stay and fight rather than leave and start over, because running away meant abandoning a lot of value. Also, there were fewer places available to run to. This caused more conflict, and increasing conflict forced the government to step in and settle things more often. Normally, people love the government knocking on their door, but Japanese commoners were not that into it. To stop relying on the shogunate so much, they needed a way to resolve arguments on their own when words failed. Enter criminals. Crime doesn't pay. It pays well. There are always those in society who don't follow the rules. They commit crimes, they scam people, overall being a nuisance to society. But we'll talk about crypto bros another day. In the Japanese countryside, these local warriors and strongmen were popping up everywhere. The elites had a name for them, Akutō. It meant evil bandit or outlaw, like a thug or criminal, but it was a label that usually just meant people causing trouble for us. I have a video all about Akutō and who they were, if you're interested. The men we talk about in this video are a specific type of Akutō. Okay, fine, the word criminal is a bit dramatic. Some were criminals, but a better label I've heard is violent businessmen. Men in the business of violence, like Uber Eats, but instead of food, they deliver consequences. Some were unhappy veterans of the Mongol Wars who thought their skills could be used for profit rather than just offing themselves. Others were normal tough guys who at some point in their childhood got into a fight and realized they liked the sound of their fists against someone's face. I like wind chimes myself. So how did commoners come to rely on these rough men? Many commoners across the country lived on private lands called estates that belonged to Japanese nobles or temples. These noble or priestly landowners lived in or around the capital. To a commoner, the landowner was about as present as a dad who went out for milk and discovered Buddhism. But landowners did hire guards to protect their lands. This had the minor side effect of protecting the people living on those lands too, I guess. A few guards on patrol was usually enough to keep order, but sometimes a large gang of thugs would wander into the estate and cause trouble. Now, when there's something violent in the neighborhood, who are you going to call? Violent businessmen. The landlord might call on people from the estate or from neighboring areas. They could be local leaders. These community warriors might already have a dedicated gang ready for battle, or they had enough influence to rally others to the cause. People fought not only to protect their families and belongings, but also for profit. Afterwards, the landowner would reward the defenders with gifts, money, or even jobs managing the estate. Some overachievers didn't even wait to be called. They would go fight the invaders, then ask for rewards afterwards, giving proof of what they did. Or they died. The market was competitive. For example, when his village was being attacked by hundreds of mounted thugs, an influential guy named Shoyo gathered a few hundred men of his own and gave them the whole samurai starter pack, horses, weapons, and armor, and probably a speech about bravery. They chased away the invaders, and afterwards he wrote to the landowner describing his deed. And it worked. He secured a position in the local estate administration, and probably a nice chunk of change to pay his men. Now, there are two interesting things we can learn from this story. One, reward was expected. It was a fight between a few hundred men on each side, a pretty big battle back then. To be fair, it is a scientific fact that numbers tend to accumulate more digits whenever profit is involved, so Shoyo might have exaggerated those numbers. But whatever the exact number was, Shoyo seemed to have gathered a pretty big force. Battles are like weddings. The costs add up fast. All the horses, weapons, armor, and food are expensive, and that's just a small wedding. Shoyo must have been confident he would get rewarded. 2. There were experienced warriors in his ranks. We know this from what Shoyo gave his men: horses. Now, you can't just hop on a horse and expect to become a hero in the battlefield. All you'll become is a cautionary tale. I knew a guy named Seiku. He thought riding was a piece of keiku. Now, there must have been normal commoners in Shoyo's defense force, but a good chunk of it was made up of experienced men who could fight on horseback. Not to mention, they were defending against a mounted enemy. We've all watched a scene in anime or movies where marauders would ride into a village and start rapping and pillaging while the peasants ran around helpless. But actually, rural communities could defend themselves, and they could even call upon actual experienced warriors to do it. Sometimes the invaders were actually sent by other landlords. For example, temples owned a lot of land, which meant they also owned a lot of land disagreements. But being Buddhist monks, it's amazing how calm and peaceful they could be while they sent fighters to attack the other temple. Buddha said, "Peace comes from within, and our archers come from behind." These violent businessmen were useful in smaller matters too. They were hired for all kinds of jobs, like protecting convoys and collecting debt. Many of their jobs were likely to show up in ethics classes, though. You probably don't want to be friends with these people or have them babysit your kid, but communities did rely on men who were experts of violence. They seemed to know what they were doing. Looking at reports, Akutō forces could be quite organized. They built fortifications and wooden towers where they threw rocks and logs down. They led enemies into traps and ambushes. They put bark and crushed bamboo on the ground to make it hard for troops to move. When rival villages fought, it usually wasn't just a few thugs settling things behind the shed. Often, much of the village joined in. Over time, as the population rose like bread dough, close communities formed networks or alliances to protect each other. These alliances were often areas that belonged to the same landowner. The owner was an important leader in conflicts because he could rally fighters from all his nearby lands. If you heard of the Ikki from the later Civil War era, these defense networks resembled those. Some of the stronger Ikki were able to resist powerful warlords, even the master arsonist himself, Oda Nobunaga. Now, it doesn't mean that these earlier defense networks evolved into Ikki. History isn't Pokemon. They were different. But it does show us that the outbreak of war in the Sengoku period later on didn't smack these commoners in the face with surprise. Commoners already had some familiarity with warfare and tactics. Now, as time went on, a curious thing happened. The Akutō label that was so common in documents of the Kamakura period became like your boyfriend after the pregnancy test. It disappeared. People stopped talking about them. Now, does that mean that the countryside was all peaceful, no more bandits and local thugs? No. The term Akutō faded because of 3 likely reasons. 1, many of these violent businessmen just moved up in the world. They took their gangs and charming personality disorders and joined the larger armies of powerful warlords who didn't know it at the time, but they were preparing for the deadly civil wars that were about to happen. 2, some could have joined and served under the shogunate or the imperial court, becoming legitimate fighters. And 3, more importantly, the label of Akutō was used to scare the Kamakura shogunate into sending men to help. Problems sounded more serious when bandits and outlaws were involved. After the Kamakura shogunate fell, the term lost its punch. People were more likely to take their land disputes to local or provincial authorities instead of the central government. And so the word went away. Let's take a moment to remember the people this word referred to. The bandits and criminals who were often the very people protecting rural Japan. This term akuto actually confused historians for a long time. It seemed like a bunch of bandits just appeared all over Japan out of nowhere. Click here to learn about the confusion and what the truth actually was. We have a new emperor on Patreon today, Stephen Wan. All hail the emperor. Thank you so much. We also have some new regular members on Patreon and YouTube today. Andre Santiago, Katana Joel Lant, a mighty appropriate name, and Blob Geode. Thank you, you're all awesome. All right, I love you, and spread the knowledge.